So, I always have about, Carrie Ann can tell you this too, I have about 6 backup plans for just about everything. And the fact that our hospital is around 20 minutes from, 22 minutes from, I did the math a lot, from our house, and that one of the other routes is about 27 minutes, and then my third backup route is about 31 minutes. If I went into all that, you'd get scared about how much thought I put. You just get nervous, so that's where I'm at right now. I've got my list and I have stuff to bring, plus the stuff that's already packed in the bag. You've all been where I am right now, so you know what's going on with me. But just don't forget your wife. That's right. Get in the car. Oh wait. It's practice for not forgetting the baby later. That's good. I'm not gonna do that. Okay. Well. Anyway. Where am I starting? Oh, that's right. So the devil is in the details. That's what I was going to say. Now, if it's me, then the devil loves to pick on the details because he knows that all he has to do is fix or foil one thing of every one of Jeff's plans, and it all goes and there we go. And so that's a great segue. That's a great segue. I was going to talk about long shirts versus belly shirts or whatever. That's a better segue actually. Anyway, belly shirts are back. Okay, talking about the devil today. All right, so I was in John 7. If you wanna go there, that's where I'm going. This week I've been all over John 7, and it's been frustrating for me because if you look through John 7, it's just basically the story of Jesus is getting closer and closer and closer to the big main event, right? He's going to die, and that's the big main event of the whole experience. And of course, the big main event that comes after that is him rising from the dead, and that being the big focal point. But at the moment, even the disciples can't really grasp that, so every time that Jesus is someplace and he goes, hey, I'm getting you ready for this, they kind of go, well, what do you mean? And they're, all over the place, and they're really trying to hold it together. And meanwhile, Jesus can't go anywhere without someone attempting an assassination attempt on his life. And so the religious leaders just are very connected, they know everybody, and that's John 7. It's just, well, I was going to go here, but then the religious leaders are trying to kill me, so then I have to go here, and that kind of thing. And so I had a couple things I wanted to bring up today. First of all, what happens when the devil gets into the details? And then secondly, how can we turn that around? How can we use that? How can we use his weakness against him? Because he has one major weakness as well in going along with this. Now, what I was going to talk about was actually another aspect that driving can be influenced in that way. So I've talked about my mission trips to Mexico a lot. Well, Canby Christian's missions to Mexico a lot. And even though they were just a week, honestly, we got way more out of them than the people that we went to witness to and to serve over there, because we're only down there for a week. And in the going there and the coming back, we actually learned so much more about our own faith. We'd have Bible studies we'd have to go through on the way over there and such. And honestly, coming back from that, and going to and coming back from Mexico were some of the most meaningful events of the entire trip. And when I first got on board, I was a kid that was just out of high school, and I didn't really know a great deal about the experience or what was going to happen, but I learned really quickly that, especially on that trip, cars love to break down. Now, if you're a church, you sometimes have access to, well, we always use this van, or we always use this guy's car to do this. Well, Canby Christian had 3 different cars that they owned and used for all Mexico-related trips. And this was 2 Ford 16-passenger vans, and then 1 large Chevy bus. It was kind of one of the short Chevy buses. I believe it used to be used for a senior care facility, and then Canby Christian got their hands on it. But all these vehicles have the same thing in common. They all sit out in the weather until you need them, which is a year. And then as soon as you need them, no one really checks them over or anything like that. They just one guy, oh yeah, we know this guy, and he's a mechanic, and he takes it to his house, and he goes, yeah, it looks good to me. And then you pile everybody in, and you go drive for 4,000 miles. Do you see a problem here? I do. And we did. You get the first part, everybody's happy and excited and stuff. All the teenagers readily fall asleep in the first, 3 hours or so after their first McDonald's binge. McDonald's inspires the post-Turkey Day naps. And so they all pass out all over the van, and it's very silent for quite a while until finally you hear the telltale signs of something going on. So one year it was we actually made it all the way into Mexico, and myself and my friend Brandon were actually sitting in the front of one of the 16-passenger vans. He was driving, and he was remarking to me, "Man, it's good that we haven't had any mechanical issues." And I went, "What are you doing? Stop it right now." And he's like, "Oh, we're already into Mexico and stuff. We've got grace." Boom! The tire just shredded, almost exactly as he says that on the back of the van. And the thing, he's just pulling it to the side. We get it off the side of the road and stuff. We are in the middle of nowhere now. We have passed anywhere that would have helped us. There's a giant Costco in Ensenada. That would have been nice. They sell tires. Nope, didn't break down there. It was going up the side of this mountain. It was basically a one-lane road that someone had stuck a yellow line in the middle of and went, it's good enough for 2 cars, right? And so we're stuck in the middle. We ended up having to walk up the rest of the hill, and, miraculously, there is a tire shop at the very top. And by a tire shop, I mean there was what looked like a little shack that had a picture of a round donut-y thing on it. No words, none. And there was a nail sticking into the donut-y black-looking thing. And so we're like, oh, tire shop. And he had tires piled up. Not even on racks, just piled up. And so we walk over there and we get the measurements for the tire. And we walk up there and not knowing Spanish, I point to the one that matches. And I go, "How much?" or something like that. And, back and forth, this took about an hour to figure out the price, and it looked like we were paying for a tire that had already seen its share of road wear, and boy, I don't know, it was just such a sketchy. It made it all the way to the mission base, though, and all the way back home, so that was an amazing tire. And apparently, Brandon called me like a week after we got done with that trip, and he said, "Oh, I was driving past the church, and that tire's flat." So that was a great tire. Another year, it was even more interesting. We were on the way, we were in the Chevy, in the big Chevy bus, and that thing was not the most comfortably put together piece of equipment. It would rattle and shake, and so there would be this constant noise as you're going down the road and stuff. And it was just not put together, and it was about 200,000 miles too that were on it. And so, things on its last leg and then some. And all of a sudden, my friend Lee is sitting right next to me, and all of a sudden it's night. He goes to flick on the main lights, and there's lights to light the bus up if you ever needed to. He's trying to flick on the lights because he's got to go find something, and we're in San Diego, California, trying to make it to this church we have to spend the night at. It's about 12 at night, and he flicks the lights, and lights won't come on. All of a sudden, at that moment, both headlights go off as well, and we're going, "Oh no!" Things start, and then the headlights come back on, and then now we don't have brake lights, and then we don't have turn signals, and we're just going, "Oh man, please just make sure that we're really hoping that the one electrical component that was still remaining was the spark plugs, because obvious reasons." And so we finally get into the church there, and the entire electrical system just goes out. So, I could go on for an hour. Every time we went on that trip, there would be something like that happen. And every time we made it into Mexico without something happen, we'd be really worried. And for a while, I kind of wondered to myself, apart from all the vehicle maintenance that didn't get done, what are some reasons where this actually would happen, at these specific times? And one of the things I came up with, and actually a guy that came on the trip, a church planter named Sean Tomei, who's now the leader of Northwest Christian Evangelical Association. They plant churches throughout the Pacific Northwest. He told me once, the devil does not have to destroy the church. That would be way too drawn out of a plan for the devil to do. So the devil's not after that kind of thing. You know what the devil likes to do? He loves to pick on one weakness and exploit it. All he has to do is undermine one person, and that person will spread said disease amongst whoever they're with. And so that would manifest itself on these Mexico trips first as frustration. It would be one person. Sometimes it was me. That one person would get frustrated. Said frustrated person goes and gets frustrated at another individual, and all of a sudden the thing begins to snowball into a bigger situation than a flat tire, which is pretty easily fixed. Now, what I want to talk to you about is actually the people that should have been on Jesus' side throughout John 7 and really throughout the entire book of John and all the rest of the Gospels as well. The religious leaders should have seen him a mile away. Have you ever sat down and thought that to yourself? I did this last week. I was sitting down and thinking to myself and going, you know what? These are the most learned people in the whole land, and they should have seen Jesus coming like a road flare a mile away and gone, this is the guy. This is totally the guy. He matches everything. But you know what? The devil knew that Jesus was coming, and knowing that he'd already lost, that's a little bit of a sneak peek for later, knowing that he'd already lost the war, he decides to win various battles, and he does. So in John 7, if you go down to, let's see here, if you go down to verse 16, that's where I'm going to start. And I encourage you throughout the next week, if you want to read all of John 7, you can. It's kind of a repeating theme over and over again. This is the theme. Jesus answered, "My teaching is not my own. It comes from him who sent me. If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. He who speaks on his own does not gain honor for him, does so to gain honor for himself. But he who works for the honor of the one that sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me?" So he confronts the religious leaders and he says to them, look, I am the fulfillment of everything that you know. In fact, if I was speaking on my own, it would be to gather praise for myself. Yet everywhere I go, I'm poor. I'm followed by all of you. I'm persecuted by all of you, and you constantly try and kill me. Wouldn't you think that if I was myself trying to gain honor for myself, that it would happen at some point? Wouldn't I gain fame and fortune if that's what I'm trying to do? If I'm performing miracles, I can make people well. I can make the blind see. I can go around and do all these miraculous things. Wouldn't I be doing that for my own gain? And if I was doing that for my own gain, wouldn't that become apparent? But no. It was said throughout his whole ministry that Jesus had no place to lay his head. He was constantly a nomadic individual, going from place to place, house to house, sleeping where he could, eating when he could. This wasn't a rich endeavor that he was doing. And yet, the religious leaders, every time he gets up to talk, they completely continue saying what they say next. Watch this. The crowd says this in verse 20. "You are demon-possessed," the crowd answered. "Who is trying to kill you?" At this point, I would be pulling my hair out if I were Jesus. But it gets better. So if we go to verse 25, first of all, the next part of verse 21, Jesus kind of attempts to answer their question. But in verse 25, I think it gets even better. At that point, some of the people of Jerusalem began to ask, "Isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Here he is, speaking publicly, and they are not saying a word to him. Have the authorities really concluded that this is the Christ? But we know where this man is from. When the Christ comes, no one will know where he is from." Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, "Yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him, because I am from him, and he sent me." At this, they tried to seize him. But no one laid a hand on him, because his time had not yet come. Still many in the crowd put their faith in him. They said, "When the Christ comes, will he do more miraculous signs than this man?" So Jesus just made a good point. And I like in verse 30. So throughout John 7, the religious leaders are constantly says, "Yeah, I can't go here because the religious leader's trying to kill me." Well, he tried to go there, but the religious leader's trying to kill him. He left there because he was attempting. It's just the entire thing, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. But at some point, I was thinking to myself, if this is really Jesus, now me, if this is Jesus, wouldn't he just be able able to stand wherever he wanted and preach wherever he wanted? Wouldn't there be an invisible shield of angels around him to prevent them from killing him? I mean, what is this running around? He looks a little bit scared. And I began to think to myself, man, this isn't really the Jesus I'm familiar with. But in verse 30, at this they tried to seize him, but no one could lay a hand on him because his time had not yet come. So someone gets a bit too close, and I don't know how this happened. It was perhaps maybe one of the religious leaders. It might have been one of their temple guards or something like that. They had their own little mini army, basically, to enforce their crazy laws they had made. Maybe one of them attempted to lay a hand on Jesus. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was like an electrical impulse and all of a sudden they got sent backwards to the floor or something like that. It would have been pretty dramatic, right? It doesn't mention anything like that. It just says that they attempted to lay a hand on him, but they could not. So I'm wondering if with all of this running around and not being able to speak where he wants to and having to change locations all the time and that kind of thing, is Jesus really on the run? Or, since Jesus is God in the flesh, he is God and man at the same time, all-powerful, can do whatever he wants, is he just trying to tell us something? And if he's just trying to tell us something, I wonder if he is trying to tell us that, look, what if you were just like the religious leaders of the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees? And at camp we had a little jingle about them. It went like, why would I not want to be a Pharisee? Because they're not fair, you see. And we had all these ways of making fun of the Sadducees. They're sad, you see. But in a bigger picture, they are some men and women who knew so much, but yet their knowledge got the best of them. They knew so much that they decided, ooh, boy, here are the laws of Moses, right? We have our 10 Commandments. But you know what? That's not good enough for our people because our people keep screwing up. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to make more laws and more commandments to keep them away from even going close to breaking those commandments. And then pretty soon you have this convoluted religion that's basically created out of thin air by these people. They had learned so much that their knowledge had gotten ahead of them. And I'm not saying that knowledge is a bad thing. In fact, knowledge is great. But if you use your knowledge in a way to undermine the ministry of who is coming right after you, you've done a horrible disservice to God. So the devil used their pessimism. The devil used their reliance on their own teachings and what they had memorized and their reliance on everything that they knew. The devil used all of that against them. That's a tragedy. So I went forward this week. I went to John 8, and I know I'm skipping ahead of myself. I went to John 8, verse 42. Eventually, if you keep poking the lion being Jesus, the lion will get a little bit angry and he will begin to poke back. And I think Jesus at some points gets a little bit frustrated with the fact that the devil is so much caught in the details right now that he is undermining the very people who are supposed to help Jesus. So this is what Jesus does. He calls them, first of all, before this, he calls them illegitimate children, which kind of makes them a little bit angry. Jesus said to them, "If God were your father, you would love me. For I came from God, and now I'm here. I have not come on my own, but he sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say." Get this next part. "You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desire. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. And when he lies, he speaks in his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? I am telling the truth. Why don't you believe me? He who belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is you don't even belong to God." That's interesting. Man, I've read that verse about 5 times this week because I feel like Jesus settled back. I feel like he got in a very quiet yet stern fatherly voice and he looked at these sheep that didn't even know their own shepherd, and he said, I'm your father. You don't even know my voice. You don't even know who I am anymore. You've created your own faith. And you know what? That's where you're going to stay. There is a thing that old-time sailors used to do. And a lot of this was, antiquity in the Greek and Roman times, but also all the way through the colonial period when still being at sea was such an enormous undertaking and it was so dangerous. And I love the book Master and Commander. They made a movie out of it too. The movie is horrible, but the book is great. This is a teacher talking. There's a movie called Master and Commander, and on the boat, in the book Master and Commander, there is a sailor who has tattoos on his hands, and it says, hold fast. It says, hold fast, and he's tattooed these words across his hands. And the main character, at one point, comes to him and says, where'd you get that? Why do you have those tattoos on your hands? And the sailor looks at him, and he says, well, this is so I don't get pulled off the boat. Because in storms, and when storms hit, I can't rely on myself. I have to rely on the fact that I have done everything correctly in the rigging, and I have lashed myself to the boat. I grab hold to the strongest rope I can find, and I hold fast. Also, if I'm trying to pull a man up from being a man overboard, I have to hold fast to that rope, or he'll be gone forever. And in fact, in my own life, the guy goes on, in fact, in my own life, he says, I have to remember the principles that guide me. I have to constantly be refreshing myself in the things that I know are true. I have to hold fast. I think that's pretty cool because these religious leaders had gone so far overboard, as it were, that they were not really holding fast to anything but themselves. They hadn't been together in study about their faith. They had not been talking about, what do we do? How do we know if this is the guy, if he comes? That was the biggest moment in biblical history, and they didn't even know it. They missed it. They missed the biggest moment in biblical history. And I think right now is the second biggest moment in biblical history because Jesus is coming back. And right now, we are the religious leaders getting ready for him coming back. We need to hold fast. So that means, of course, staying in church, staying in a Bible study. For me, it meant staying in prayer every morning and reading my Bible every morning. And if there was a chance at school to bring it up, or, there's actually various kids that know about my faith, and they'll come to me and ask me questions about it, which I think is amazing. There's a few coworkers that also know about this. And when they need prayer, it's kind of funny. They don't really need God until they need prayer. And so they'll actually come to me and they'll be like, hey, can you pray for this? And I'll think to myself, oh, okay, I can do that. And all of that is because I've decided to hold fast. But I would encourage you today that when the storm comes and when, maybe not even the storm, maybe the devil being in the details and that kind of thing. And this is honestly a pep talk with myself because, if baby decides to come and I'm at school or something like that, and all 6 of my backup plans fall into the toilet and get flushed down, right? And now all of a sudden I have to go, what do I do? I have to hold fast to the things that my wife has told me, the things that I have read about in this. Yes, I did read an entire book about birth. And all of that kind of stuff. I need to hold fast to those kind of things. And the same is true for this. The same is true for this. As the time grows closer, as my kids ask me, Daddy, why do we do this? Or why do we come here every Sunday? It was kind of funny. As a kid, I was that kind of kid who would ask those questions. And my parents, I don't want to put this on them or past them. My parents did a very good job on this. They told me every time, no, these are the things that we do. These are the principles our family stands for, and we're in these things every single day. And then, finally, you met my grandma, a little 86-year-old lady. She and my grandpa were not coming to church. They were believers at one point, but just had decided to, it kind of got out of the habit, I guess. I know they just got out of the habit of going to church. And I remember as a little kid wondering why my grandparents didn't come to church. So as a little 4-year-old boy, my grandma told me later that I kept coming to her and asking her, why don't you and Grandpa come to church? And I guess it broke my grandpa's heart. It broke my Grandpa Jack's heart. And I guess he would cry every time I said that. And finally, they started coming to church. And they became one of the most involved members of that church, not because of me, but because my parents held fast. They had the invisible tattoos across their fists, and they decided to keep me immersed in the fact that this is who we are because the day is coming. So hold fast. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for all the lessons about your ministry when you got here, all the illustrations that you used, even if I'm still trying to grasp most of them, God. I thank you for all of the impact that you made and the fact that you, even though you allowed the devil to be the prince of this earth right now, he has lost. He has completely lost this battle. God, I praise you for that.